And so now what we want to do is throw it over to our executive panel and find out what are their real-world experiences. So please join me in welcoming back Ron Tite.
Thank you, Ron. Yes, okay. So as Bill mentioned, that is really the idea behind the panel. We all know it's a different skill set to talk about what to do than to actually be doing it. And that's the operational reality that everybody here is faced with. And so what we want to do is really get that operational reality from people who are in the trenches and also have a kind of unique Canadian perspective to complement some of the speakers we have today. So we have three wonderful guests with us here today. First of all, please welcome the General Manager of Commercial Marketing at Canada Post, Jennifer Campbell. Hello, Jennifer. You got a woo.
All right, my team's in the house.
The team is in the house. So, can you tell us commercial marketing, kind of your average day? What are you doing at Canada Post?
Day. Well, I and my team get to do all of the marketing, B2B.
Yep.
So fun challenges for all of our parcels, smart mail marketing.
Yep.
Working with our fabulous sales team. My team also works with advertising agencies. We do our own customer events. We participate at trade shows, and we like to hang out at places like this. So you name it, we're doing it.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
So a nice variety of perspectives on the discussion today.
And really getting to talk to marketers about all of the wonderful things that are going on and seeing trends. And we have this really unique perspective because there aren't that many companies that are actually not customers of Canada Post. So across industry, across the country and in the US, large, small, sophisticated, just starting out, e-commerce marketing, every vertical. So it's a really, it's a unique perspective that allows us to then, share that with everybody else.
Yeah, you're like Beyonce. Everybody's a client.
Exactly.
Everybody's a client. Okay, well, welcome. Thank you for coming. Second, please welcome the Editor-in-Chief of Marketing Magazine, Schick. Welcome, Shane. Thank you for joining us on the panel.
Absolutely.
It's great to have you here. Shane, where are you finding, in terms of kind of the editorial, the stuff you're covering, how are you staying on top of just, and making those decisions of like, what are the top stories and what is the kind of the bullshit stories that really don't have a lot of merit to it?
Well, I think the main challenge that a lot of our audience is facing right now is trying to tell more engaging, more emotionally connective stories using all the various digital tools and traditional tools that they have at their disposal. So we are primarily looking for people who we think are innovating in that way and who are demonstrating leadership in terms of executing on that. And I guess also ones where there's sort of a tangible measurement or a tangible benefit back to the organization. Stories where we can show that, I think, are really helpful to our audience because I think everybody is under pressure to show, greater ROI for everything that they're spending. So when there is elements of a campaign or an event or anything like that that we can show what they're getting from their investment, that's a powerful story for us.
Yeah, I think the next cover story is how not to appear as a case study in Avinash Kaushik's.
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah, that's right. So welcome, Shane. And finally, please welcome the Executive Director of Marketing, Sales, and Services for 3M, Erin Craven. You also got some woos from your team. Welcome, Erin. What is 3M up to these days? It's a broad, sweeping statement, I know.
It's a very broad question. 55,000 products. I could talk for quite a while. Well, we're trying to drive a lot of change right now. We've been known as the innovation company for a really long time. We believe that word's lost a lot of meaning these days. It's been a little overused, and so trying to reposition the company on who we truly are, which is a science company. We are a science company that applies our science to make life better, and so for me, it's about trying to modernize sales and marketing and take us from a 100-year-old manufacturing and mining company with a lot of product generalists to trying to become a more modern sales and marketing company that can catch up to all the changes that are happening in the marketplace today.
Yeah. How frustrating is it with 55,000 products, science leading the way, always being at the forefront of innovation and science for somebody to go, oh, you make the yellow stickies.
Yeah, and especially that you just said stickies.
Post-it notes,
note.
post-it
We are
notes.
so
Yeah,
much
I
more
know.
than Post-it
I was
notes.
playing into that. Yes,
I know
totally.
you were. I know you were.
You raise a great point there, though. Do we like the term innovation, or like why are you guys walking away from it when everybody else it's the buzzword within organizations? How do we innovate? Like why did you guys walk away from it? You owned it.
Well, we did, but then we didn't do, to be honest, a good enough job protecting it, that it was ours. And it's become so ubiquitous and used by everyone that it was really, even our own employees couldn't tell you what is our innovation story. We weren't able to do that anymore. And we're a company with millions of amazing stories.
Yeah.
So it was time. It was time to modernize that as well and be true to who we really are, which is a science company.
Yeah, but Jennifer, for you guys, you want to be telling the innovation story, right? Because you're doing amazing things that not as many people know about them as they should.
Absolutely. So we're a 253-year-old organization, big and potentially slow, and a crown corporation that is trying to act a little bit more like a startup.
Yeah.
And in fact, one of our best innovation stories that our own president, Deepak Chopra, not the meditation one, wrote in the Globe and Mail was about our app that he almost killed, and it was actually an idea written on a Post-it note. So it all comes back, and it's really those moments. And I think the presenters this morning talked about it. Is how are you going to position yourself differently? How are you going to show up differently, and have people think about you differently? And what are those? It's not the next big thing, but it really is those little micro innovations. How are you looking at the world differently? My team every day comes with great ideas, and my job is to try and protect them from all of the bureaucracy and the process, to let them try things and let us, some of them are not going to work, but some of them are brilliant, and it moves the company forward. And if we have that across an organization of 68,000 people, there are those brilliant moments, but there are the stories to tell, and how do you bring those to light so that when someone looks at us and says, actually the post office is not at all what I thought it was, and in fact, you guys are doing some pretty cool things.
Yeah. Shane, are we covering innovation in the right way? I don't mean you guys, but just generally, whether it's a case study or whether it's a big story, because I think we do find where people want to check the box, right? Where they're going, okay, there's the Q3 initiative of innovation.
Yeah, we get pitches literally every day, not just myself, but our team, about people that talk about an innovation strategy. We come across more and more organizations that are appointing or promoting someone into a chief innovation officer role. And I think that sort of the definition around that is very ephemeral for a lot of organizations. And so, I would say that I think innovation is often part of an incomplete sentence, in the sense that what I think it comes down to, and I think you're alluding to this a little bit, is where are you innovating? Are you innovating in terms of the kind of customer experience you're providing vis-a-vis your competitors? Are you innovating around your costs, maybe with technology that you've introduced to lower that, or new models of reaching your target audience? Are you innovating around the way that you hire and attract people? Because there's so many organizations that are struggling to get really talented people into traditional organizations that are flocking to startups, for example. So I think that there's all kinds of ways to innovate, but it's not necessarily coming up with a specific breakthrough, but building upon traditional practices and offering even an incremental improvement can be innovative if it actually has a really tangible, measurable result.
It's kind of like you want to say, have you seen Stephen Shapiro speak? If you have not, then
totally.
we're not going to, right? It's almost like you got to take the class first.
Yeah.
But Erin, how do you, again, because Stephen and Avinash had some great messaging there, but how do you convince others to walk away from the BS, that whether it's the BS metrics or it's the BS definition of innovation? How do you mobilize the troops internally to just do the right thing?
Yeah, I mean, that is the biggest challenge. I'm sure there's a lot of us in this room facing this challenge. It's trying to do things differently when we have these finite budgets and this limited amount of time and this quarterly return that we have to hit on. And do you really have the chance to take these risks and try new things when, marketing was, traditional marketing is what we did for so long. As a leader for the company, what I'm trying to do is celebrate the risk takers, let them, encourage them to try, and then I always say we're a company of proof points. So I need one division to try it, and then I'll share that story. I'll shout it from the rooftops to the whole company as often as I can to try and get others to feel comfortable taking that risk as well. But you got to have the outcomes at the end of the day.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. You wanted something there of kind of using storytelling to kind of get people on side and kind of telling the success story internally. Are we tired of storytelling? I mean, Shane, is it one of those things that everybody says, you got to tell great stories?
Yeah, no, I don't think that we're tired of storytelling. I think we're tired of using it, again, kind of like innovation in a generic way. And I think that when we talk about things like content marketing, again, there's lots of different kind of definitions. I would define it more as stories that are more about your audience than about your products and services.
Yep.
So ways that, where you might not be mentioning your products and services at all, really, but you're showing by the stories you're telling about them that you understand their needs, that you care about, their problems, and that, you're deeply invested in being a part of that community. I think when you tell stories from that perspective, it's so much more powerful than, something that's essentially the equivalent of a joke, where you sort of set up a situation and then it points to, buy our detergent. I think that there is room to innovate in stories, and I think the best organizations that are doing it are taking, more of an editorial approach. They're kind of creating their own media in order to do that.
Yeah, Erin, you said you would tell the story internally. What power do stories have internally to gather people around a strategy or a process?
Oh, I think they have so much power. It's relatable, right? If you can, I always say, excuse my language, same shit, different products. Like for our marketing community.
Avinash already dropped, what, 8 F-bombs? You're totally
so
good.
I figured I was okay.
Yeah.
But when you have 55,000 products and 27 divisions and, everyone thinks, oh no, my business is different, my products are different. Well, they're not. The fundamentals are the same. So if you can take the story and share it in a way that is relatable to everybody else, then, they see themselves in that. But storytelling is a skill. It's not one that everybody has. And so I think that's one of the biggest challenges we probably have as marketers is how do you get that skill set into the organization? And is it something you acquire? Is it something you outsource? Is it something you try and build internally? And we're debating that all the time.
Yeah, Jennifer?
And we've, in our introduction of smart mail marketing and trying to get marketers to think differently, we spent a lot of time internally with our sales teams.
Yep.
And in, training, but a lot of it was about storytelling and showing up differently. And it's interesting because I think as individuals, ultimately we are selling or marketing, it's a human to human, right? It's not about a B2C, it's not about a B2B, you want to have that conversation.
Yep.
And so it's been interesting to watch and participate as these 200 plus really awesome salespeople have gone through this, and some of them get it, but I think as most humans, we're like, I don't have a story to tell. Who's going to want to know my story? And so what I've seen is, to your point, when you have the couple of stories to share, and then people can latch onto that and make it their own. So there was one, I had a video of somebody, and it was a teenager reaction to getting a Starbucks Gold Reward card. Some of you have maybe seen it if you've seen our presentations. And so suddenly Katie became everybody's neighbor, niece, cousin, daughter, because that was a story that resonated with them, and they could kind of practice with that until they felt comfortable coming up with their own stories to share. So we share them internally, and then we can share them, with the world. And it's similar with all the case studies that we collect. It's not our voice, it's the voice of marketers all around the world, or of e-commerce companies all around the world telling their stories.
Yep.
And we can latch onto those.
Yeah, Shane?
I think as Erin said, though, the big question for a lot of organizations is, do we have the capacity to do this in-house, or do we look elsewhere? And I think one of the challenges that's coming up is traditional agencies aren't necessarily offering what they're looking for, or the organization feels that their story is so native to them that they need to have that. So we are doing more and more stories about organizations that are setting up their own in-house content studios, for example. They're still working with traditional agencies and they're working with content marketing firms and so on, but in some cases they're appointing people with a title like mine, which would not be common in a 3M, I wouldn't think, 10 years ago. But I think it's sort of understanding how much of that are you willing to outsource and how much of that do you need to kind of hold very close to yourself, because it does become a part of the culture if it's successful internally.
You know what I love is you should say to people like, you should tell great stories, and they go, I'm not a good storyteller. And you go, yeah, how'd you meet your wife? And they go, it was a Tuesday, it was raining. Is that right? Like when it's a story they care about, they tell a great story.
And people are going to respond to that.
And people are going to respond to it. Yeah, exactly. I remember when I did some work with Dell, and you'd go into Dell and go, hey, how did Dell start? And everybody in that organization knew the story. They're like, well, Michael Dell was 19 years old. He started building computers in his garage. And not only was it a great story to tell and gave that company a soul, but it really fueled the kind of the entrepreneurial spirit that ran through the entire organization, all based on that one story.
And that's the organizational innovation that we were referencing earlier. It's okay, well, what does the organization need to look like to try and support this and become good at this? So for us, it's, we have scientists all over the company. Our labs are our most exciting places in the company. They talk over everybody's head. How do we get them to become storytellers and not use, words this long, but tell the story, tell the human side of the story.
Right. Now, Shane, you mentioned something like, full disclosure, the Tite Group, my agency, is a content marketing agency. So sometimes I have to ask questions and play dumb just so we get the right answers, okay? Shane, what the hell is content marketing? It means a million different things to a million different people.
Well, and also full disclosure, prior to marketing, I did some work for the Tite Group. So I was one of those editors that had the privilege of working with Ron and his team. And I think really the best content marketing is that which really would look and feel just like any other editorial product that was produced by a company like Rogers, where I work, but many of the other kinds of media companies. It's ones that are offering insight and value, but really telling things more from the perspective of that audience rather than what the company actually makes and does. That doesn't mean that there isn't a call to action somewhere within there to say learn more about what we do and so forth. But those call to actions are really kind of the closest we're seeing to ads, in a long time that actually have value to people. So I think, great content marketing doesn't feel like marketing. I think that's probably the best way to look at it.
Jennifer, what are you guys doing with content? And how do you differentiate content from all the other pieces of communication?
Well, that's a good point. So we have, we're working through this. So this is having an actual strategic approach and a place to put it all and what to do with it is a journey for us, absolutely, as I'm sure it is for others in the room. So there's the marketing. We've done research. We're talking backstage, and I've heard neuroscience come up a lot today. We've actually commissioned the largest neuroscience research in the world. Right? I know, right? The post office. So how do you get that content and how do you get it out there in a way that is relatable? The stories that we tell, the case studies that we collect and curate and share with the marketplace. So again, it's the content that we're providing to the marketplace. We're not the creators of all of it, but we are trying to share it and then start the conversation and get that additional content back in, and it's a path that we're on.
Yeah. Now and this can be for certainly Shane, you'll have a perspective on this, but. It used to be so easy when it was like, this is content, you don't touch that. This is advertising, we don't touch that, right? And the two was kind of this symbiotic relationship. It's so blurry now, and where can brands, how can brands decide where they play in that? Like, is church and state dead now? Is everything really just an ad? I mean, I love what Rogers is doing from a sports perspective. Love. But if I see a news story that has the Blue Jays in the headline on a Sportsnet, is that because it's the top story, or is that because Rogers also owns the Blue Jays and they're advertising bums and seats? Now, I think that's brilliant integrated marketing and sales and all coming together. But from brand, how do you play in that? How do you compete in that world?
It's hard. I mean, I think we're in this fuzzy state right now, and we were just talking about this backstage too, because we're trying to do what's right in content. We're trying to experiment. We're trying to understand it.
Yeah.
And that's hard in a company companies of our size. But at the same time, we're still being pulled into traditional because some of our customers are there. You know, when we're talking about a welder in Fort McMurray, you know what? They want that catalog in front of them.
Yep.
They still do. So yeah, right now I'm finding it so difficult. It's like, how do you prioritize? Where do you allocate your spend? Because we need to get that bigger brand story out there. We want it to be authentic. I think going back to what you're saying is, where does brand play in that? I think you don't lose when you're true. When it's true, when it's real, when it's authentic, you're going to win.
Yep.
And that's why, you know, for us making this move to science applied to life, it's resounding so well because that is who we truly are. You know, I'll give you a perfect example. Yesterday, we found out in Forbes magazine posted their top 25 companies that millennials want to work for. We've never been on that list, ever. Yesterday we got it. We're number one. Google was always number one. 3M, never on the list, number one. We're even looking at each other. We said, did we buy that? How did we get that? Literally, we weren't sure. But no, we didn't. The reality is that we're being true to who we are now, and we're taking that message to the right audience. All these kids in science and engineering who want to have a job like this, and they see our scientists and think they're cool.
Yep.
And oh, by the way, this is resonating now. So boom, you make number one on the list. But yeah, even I questioned it when I said, did we buy that, or did we actually get that?
Yeah.
We actually got it.
Now, Shane, you guys do a great job of balancing that. How do you do that? How do you accomplish that?
The balance that you have to strike, and I don't think that there is a media organization in the world that isn't struggling with this right now, is definitely, you know, being transparent about, you know, what this is and who is this brought to you by, but also making it feel native to the experience, whether that's a channel that you own and operate, or whether it's, you know, somewhere where you're putting content in someone else's environment, making it feel like it's a part of that, but still making it clear that, oh, well, this is actually either sponsored content or it's native content or content marketing. I think that there are all kinds of arguments happening I know certainly in our newsrooms, in many others, on, you know, where those boundaries are. I don't think church and state is dead, but I think that the need to be transparent is critically important. And I think that, you know, it really starts from how things are sold and how things are produced, and really there's no common set of labels and definitions from one media property to another. When you Google almost any topic now in the business realm, chances are a Forbes brand voice post is going to be in that first list of rankings. And some people will look at those and like, oh, this is great legitimate content. Others will be like, well, is this, you know, paid for by Oracle, so is it, you know, compromised ethically? You know, I think Forbes has done such a great job of that, but to the extent where there's so much of that on its network that people are starting to wonder what's the true editorial of that product. I don't know if anyone's figured out the balance precisely. I think everyone's still in a period of experimentation. But I think your intentions to your audience have to be good, and their interests have to come first. And
I will say, as an outsider, having worked with Rogers and the Globe and CBC, and see, like, just the publishers, they want to do the right thing. I think really at the end of the day.
And I think the brands do too. The problem they often run into is when we talk about this form of content and this form of storytelling, I think there are certain forms that work a little bit better than others.
Yep.
I'll tell you what doesn't, or what I've noticed hasn't, is news. So when brands try to create, in a sense, you know, news where they're covering their industry the way, you know, a Globe and Mail might, it's often challenging because they have to make decisions about how willing are we to talk about our competitors, or how willing are we to talk about some of the problems that are happening.
Yep.
And I've seen multiple brands that have created their own media, in a sense, and have had to shut it down because that just didn't work out for them. And these are large organizations, you know, with the budgets to do it right, but they ultimately decided that the better stories for them were more what we would call features or profiles or best practices stories. Those things you can probably tell with a little bit more editorial integrity as a brand, I think, than trying to cover the news of the day.
Yeah, you talked about an owned audience there, and really, because that is your right as Sportsnet. You own the audience. You can communicate to that audience. Is that something that you're driving towards? Again, you know, it's better to own than to rent.
Well, I agreed with you know, the conversation earlier today. It's a combination. Right?
Yep.
So we, you know, in terms of own, again, we work with so many customers, so many companies across the country, and actually, you know, as we reposition even some of the channels that we're using, that they're using, like a direct mail, it's an owned medium, right?
Yep.
You can say whatever you want because it's targeted to that audience. And then there's, you know, the world outside, and how are you going to influence and who are the influencers that can amplify, hopefully, the message that you've got, and sometimes, pique some back and forth conversations. So it's, understanding what can you offer to those, in the owned. I don't think anybody owns anything, but the rent, and really how are you going to rent them for long term and make them loyal?
Right, right. Now you mentioned influencers, and Mitch is going to have a great discussion with Bethany Moda today. Erin, are you reaching out to influencers? And if so, I mean, isn't Brad Pitt an influencer? He's just more expensive and has a bigger audience, right?
Yeah, that's right. I think the external influencers are, they are what they are. For us, for a company like us, we can't afford that. It's just not within our budgets. But what we've realized is you can look inside your company for influencers. For us, it's our subject matter experts are our scientists. And we haven't been telling those stories loud enough. So that was a big aha for our company is, wait a second, we don't need to go out and acquire influencers. We've got them in our own company. We just got to teach them how to tell those stories and to get in front of the right audience. But when we do that, the magic does happen. So I'm a full believer in influencers. I know with our customers, we talk a lot to them. We do customer-inspired innovation. We're in there, we're in Toyota. Tell us what's going on. They don't want to hear from the marketing team. They want to hear from the scientists, the people in the lab. So you can use influencers, but you got to look inside your own walls as well.
Yep. Did you have a comment?
Well, I think exactly to that point. So I also can't buy any influencers.
Yep.
But we've got a whole industry of marketers, and we've got a whole industry of practitioners and we've got a whole industry of e-commerce companies that are growing that we're working with. And so it's who are those voices, and how do you give them a platform to be able to share broadly, and whether that's written case studies or speaking opportunities or or being guest authors on our blog and our website. That every company can do that. There's somebody out there or inside that can be that voice without having to paid to have somebody speak on your behalf.
Right, right. Is there, because when if you look at them as a business entity, for the successful and busy influencers, I mean, they're a startup who are pulling great revenues, and I know for people who may not be digital natives, the gut response is to go, oh, they have fun on Instagram. Yeah, they have fun on Instagram, and they're making way more money than you're making. They have way more influential. And bigger audiences than a lot of traditional publications. What can we as marketers learn from those people, Shane, and how they've approached that business?
Well, I think what you can learn is I don't know of anybody of that caliber who goes into their profession or whatever it is they pursue thinking, I want to be an influencer. They become an influencer because they create great content, they have a certain passion or interest that relates to that same target audience that the marketer wants to reach. And in the same way that content marketing has to be authentic in terms of focusing on that audience, the influencers already do. And I think that there is sort of two versions of that you can pursue. You can either try to cultivate a group of influencers, maybe your best customers might be great advocates for you if they have a certain platform, but there's also influencers who have established their own reach. So, they may have a really popular YouTube channel, they may have a really heavily followed blog, and the kind of way that you work with them is not necessarily traditionally transactional in that you're going to pay them like a side salary. It's can you share content with them that they're going to want to share with your audience? Because I guarantee you, if you are a blogger, one of your biggest problems is having enough content to generate on a daily or several times a day basis. So they're hungry for great content, just like an audience is. So giving them something that they'll want to share or that they feel is legitimate and true. It doesn't have to be a high-cost initiative to work with influencers if you have, great stories again to tell, and you can approach them in a very, sort of transparent and authentic way.
Yeah, that's great. The final piece I want to touch on here is because we've touched on it a little bit throughout the morning, but the notion of data and how are you steering the organization to capitalize and utilize what Shauna called unstructured data versus the kind of structured data?
I'd say we have a lot of unstructured data, but we're data rich and insight poor. I would say. And
Yeah.
again, probably like a lot of people out
I
there.
think
So we've
every
got,
person in the room
you
is
know,
nodding their head right now. Yes, that's us.
as a marketer, you know, and in B2B world, and we've got different things, and we're working hard to try and pull it in one place to get the insights and clean it up. What we also have is this amazing operational data, right? Which, as an operational company, not surprising, but from a marketer's perspective, you know, so for example, as the company that delivers about 70% of all the B2C parcels, I know where all the e-commerce shoppers are. You know, so how do you leverage that? And it's, you know, how for us to use, but importantly, how do we help our customers who are trying to grow their own businesses, help them do the targeting? And I'm not going to sell you the list of names because privacy is important, but starting to, you know, at the end of the day, we all go to a home. And there are aspects of it. And so it's maybe not as detailed as the one-to-one in digital and some of the things that are following you around, but it can really help from a marketing perspective. And we look at, you know, the external and the internal, but we're definitely on the journey of trying to clean it up so that we can market with it better, and then working with third parties as well as our customers to be able to provide them with insights that, you know, are unique because of the business that we're in to help them.
Yeah. Erin, with such a diverse organization, I mean, how do you have one strategy for data moving forward? There's going to be so many moving parts. Where do you start?
Yeah, I mean, I wish it was that simple to just have one strategy for
Yeah.
data moving forward, which there isn't. This to me is the biggest part of our journey to modernize sales and marketing. Is I keep saying, if 3M only knew what 3M knows. You know, we have so much data, exact same situation, data rich, insight poor. And the other term we use all the time is we need to move from I think to I know. I don't want to hear another marketer present a story to me where they say, I think this is happening. We have the data. It's just how do we ask the right questions? And so instead of worrying too much about the sources of the data, let's hire the experts to do that, which we're doing internally, trying to build that skill set, talking about organizational innovation again.
Yeah.
Let's get true analysts in there who understand predictive models and can do all that lovely analysis. But let's teach our team how to ask the right question. And when we get that question right, usually the answer is somewhere within our building. We'll find it. But I have no perfect answer for that question, because it is a big part of the journey right now. It's overwhelming, I find, and it's hard to even influence up on that as well, to get the senior level of the company to understand what that data can do for us. But again, the proof points. If you can get one great story and then socialize that, everyone else will start to dip their toe in that water as well.
Yeah, I think what's great there is the story that, because usually we think storytelling, we think the story that has already happened, right? We're reflecting on that story. There's, remember the movie The Usual Suspects? Right, there's the poster from the movie, is the 5 criminals, right, in the police lineup. And when the writer-director Bryan Singer thought of the movie, he just thought of that image. That was the only thing he thought of, was an image. And people told him, you can't, that doesn't exist. There's never 5 criminals in a police lineup. There's always 4 duds and 1 criminal. And he said, well, let's just write the story. Like, let's write the story that gets us to a place where we have 5 criminals in a police lineup. I think it's, kind of coming full circle here. Selling data into an organization, whether it's organizational process to get there or utilization to get to the insights, whatever it is, that we can tell the stories of what we will be when we get that. I love your line, if we knew what we already know. I think if there's a line to kind of motivate an entire organization to get behind, not only gathering data, but really getting the insights from it, that I think is the line.
When I start those conversations with people who maybe aren't on board with where we're trying to go, I usually start with, have you seen the movie Moneyball?
Right. Nice. Yeah.
That's what we're trying to do.
Right. You're bringing the sports analogy. That's great. Okay. I'm going to come into the audience, and again, we really want to kind of cover off some of the content some of the speakers are doing, and challenge Canadian marketers on the operational reality of that. So I will come into the audience for the next 8 minutes and 40 seconds. Okay. Yeah, we'll go over here. So what I'll do is come up this left-hand side. Just put your hand up and let me know if you have a question, and I will come find you. Anybody on this side? Oh, sorry. You? Yeah? No? Okay. Yep, way up here. Okay. if you could pass this down.
Jennifer, this question's for you.
Okay.
You mentioned your large neuroscience study.
Yes.
To what end? What do you want to do with the study?
What do we want to do with it? Well, the fact that you're asking me that means that you haven't read my white paper, so apparently I still have some work to do. So we've been taking it to market. As I said, it's a journey, and it's really fascinating research, so we need to make sure that we've got that out to everybody who should know about it. And it really looks at the reaction that your brain has when you use physical media as compared to digital. The good news is that some of the questions that came as a result of that were the foundation for our second neuroscience study, which we will take out to market in the fall. So we've got marketing campaigns, and I think that's part of what we're doing right now is how do we continue on with the content so that marketers and people across businesses everywhere have that perspective.
That answer your question?
But I think if you go see my booth, I think you can get a copy of the white paper at lunch.
Limited time offer until 12:35. Are there any other questions? No. Yes, oh, you had to be way over there, didn't you? Okay, I'm coming. Who was it? You.
Hi there. Question is, how much of your thinking is outsourced? Like, at what point in the organization do you feel maybe we don't have the answer in the building? Maybe we have to go and partner with another company, or partner with an association within our industry, or hire somebody else to do the thinking for us? Just curious to hear that.
Do you work at Deloitte Consulting?
I mean, I don't have an answer on the exact percentage, but I can tell you the trend. So a company as old as ours, we've always done it ourselves. We've always found a way to create it, build it, make it, solve it ourselves. So this idea of outsourcing is relatively new. But it's one that from the top we're really trying to push, because the reality is the speed and pace of change, especially within marketing automation and sales automation and what our customers are expecting of us, we simply don't have the time to do that ourselves when the expertise exists. So we're making a real trying to make a big movement towards doing more of that and partnering, especially when you think about where we're going, with products and automation in products and data collection within products. You got to know what your strength is and what it's not, and be willing to, hold the mirror up to your face and say, okay, it's time for us to go acquire that somewhere else. So I don't have an answer on percentage, but it's a real push for us is to partner, and not an easy thing to do when you haven't done that for a really long time.
I would say ours is the same, so it sort of depends on the situation, but 253 years of doing it yourself is hard to break up with. But when we look at it to sort of say, who's going to facilitate e-commerce? It's, there are great companies out there that create the platforms. Who can do extensions of direct mail into a social platform, into the digital, and it's not us building it. So we're looking at those kinds of companies. We work really closely with our agencies and companies out in the marketplace to have the thinking. I think lots of big companies go through their phases of hire all the big name consultants, and then then you move away from that. But it depends on the organization. But we're also slowly becoming comfortable with at least considering that.
Shane, how are you guys doing it in terms of how do you balance kind of people on staff and going, not your traditional freelance writers, but other people who may not have typically done that job?
It's really user-generated content, and I think organizations like the Huffington Post have been a pioneer there in terms of creating that community of voices, and I think all of us are trying to curate that collection of voices that we can have. I think ultimately, though, no organization can really afford to outsource its thinking. What you can outsource is the way you collect that information and that feedback and get a sense of what's really happening out there in the world. In a sense, journalism is the original outsourcer of thinking, because we try to find those voices and package those stories in a way that helps inspire and inform and educate people. But I think ultimately the thinking, the actual decision making, has to be native to your organization, because that's the main value that you offer to your market.
That's great. Thank you. Thanks to all of you. I know it's not easy to, agree to being on a panel, and secondly, to kind of open up about your organization and the challenges you face. So thank you very much for sharing. A big hand for our panel, everyone. Thank you.